6 o'clock, we're about to start. Before I do start, I'd just like to draw everybody's attention to the screen about the fire procedure. If you hear the fire alarm, it will be for real, so please leave by the doors, go down the stairs out of the main entrance, and please congregate on the back of the car park outside. Also, for your information, we are being recorded live on YouTube tonight. If there's any members of the general public that don't want to be recorded, please let the committee clerk know, so at the appropriate time they can cancel you from the video. That aside, right, we'll get into the main body now. And Jackie, apologies please.
Yes, Chair. Apologies tonight from Councillors Sue Barefoot, Fitzherbert and Purdy, and attending as substitutes are Councillors Froggatt, Wayne and Wakeman.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Item number 2, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. I so move.
Second, Chair.
All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Item 3, interest. Any member declaring interest in any of the items on tonight's? No? None? Okay. In which case then we'll move on to the main body of the report. So we'll start with item 4.1. This is a proposed new access and parking area at 20 Snowfield View, Wirksworth. I have got 2 speakers on this. So we'll have the first speaker, Jenny Fellows, to make comment about parking and congestion. You've got 3 minutes, and when you get to 30 seconds, I'll let you know. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Jenny Fellows, and I'm a substitute for Sharon Bridden, who is unfortunately unwell today. We support the officer's recommendation, firstly on the main ground of amenity and the urbanisation of a rural lane. I welcome the Council's recent adoption of the climate emergency motion. It is early days. And secondly, I'd like to address the justification for the extra parking space. The future really depends on not on creating more parking spaces, but on reducing the number of cars, and for example by more car sharing. And thirdly, I'd like to suggest that all future application reports should include the heading climate emergency and an assessment as to the impact of each development that comes forward, if any, on climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, short and sweet. The next speaker I have is Mrs. A. Johnson, and that's the applicant to speak in favour of the application. You've got 5 minutes, and when you've got 30 seconds left, I'll indicate. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Asa Johnson. My husband and I are the owners of 20 Snowfield View, Wirksworth, which we purchased 5 years ago as our first home. On recently starting a family, we applied for new access and parking area to be able to park closer to our property, have guaranteed parking and for the safety of our daughter. During pre-application, we were advised a refusal would be likely due to lack of country appeal. We took this advice on board and contacted Robert Morton Engineering to help change our plans. We've received positive feedback from the highway agency, but unfortunately it's been recommended for refusal on the same grounds as our pre-application. We want to help keep the appearance subtle and appealing by planting hedgerow to augment the existing and by using the timber-filled gate. The existing hedgerow is a temporary boundary structure which only exists on 5 of the 8 properties backing onto Miller's Green, one of which has been replaced entirely by fencing. We would be happy to use more mature planting to speed the growth of the hedgerow. The houses were built in a period where vehicle ownership was not an issue, the majority of properties now having 2 or more vehicles. Especially in the evening, parking on Snowfield View becomes very congested and parking near our property can be a problem. We also live on a curve which makes access for large vehicles impossible, sometimes resulting in us having to remove our cars for them to pass by. Support from our neighbours has been high, as not only would the driveway be beneficial on a personal basis, but beneficial to the community by removing 2 vehicles from the original parking. The concern for further properties in Miller's Green being encouraged to follow a similar scheme would not be a likely issue, as only 4 of the 8 properties are privately owned, one of which was being refused prior to our application by the highway agency. The properties 100 yards from Snowfield View, also on Miller's Green, were all built with a hedgerow as part of the old mill, but now all hedgerow has been removed and all have private parking and access, none of which appeals to the characteristics of the country lane which has been lying in our reasons for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John, you go if there's anything else to come back on.
Just to remind members, we went out on site today to look at this particular site, assess the impact of the creation of the parking and the engineering works involved, and we also went into Snowfields as a development just to see what the existing parking arrangements are. Thank you, Chair.
Right, questions, members? No? Nobody want to ask any questions? In which case then we'll move into debate. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. I've studied this site quite a lot. I've been round at nights and viewed this area around Snowfield, and when people return from the work at night, it is even more congested, and we've seen it this afternoon. It is very balanced, really, on one aspect. I take on board what John's saying about the surrounding area and the character of the area, but on the other hand, I'm also looking at parking issues. I agree with the first speaker that there wants to be less cars on the road and car sharing and that. I'm very much supportive of that, but we are where we are at the moment, aren't we? And we're looking at a planning issue here, really, and this planning issue isn't really to do with climate change, really. It's to do with health and safety in parking or the conservation side. And it's very balanced in between, and I'm very at crossroads here. I'm not sure whether to support the officer recommendation or not, but I'll listen to the views of the other members before I make my final judgment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Part of me wants to question whether a privet hedge is a rural hedge and something that you'd see in the countryside. And as the hedges are not continuous, I thought when we went there, from the pictures that we'd seen beforehand, I thought the hedge would be continuous, but it's not continuous, and each property has treated each hedge in a different way. So there's no real consistency from one property to another. And for me, I could see that mature planting with a typical hawthorn or something like, or hawthorn or holly or something like that, that you would see in the countryside, with a 5-bar gate or another gate that would reminiscent of countryside use, would actually enhance the rural aspect of the lane, not detract from it.
Thank you. Right, members. Any more members want to? Councillor.
I'm a bit trying to make up my mind on this one, because while we were on the site visit, we were told that some of the hedging is going to be replaced and with mixed hedging, which is an aspect of the countryside which is not shown when you've got privet hedging. So that was making me think in the first place. I can see that the actual gate might be wider than the existing gates, because I think it's already, perhaps the hole that's there at the moment is already double the size of the other gates that are along the way. And I can see that it might lead to somebody else saying, well, if that's happened there, I'll have the same, thank you very much. So it's a bit of a difficult one to make up your mind on. If we could find some solution to these parking, particularly parking on pavements, it would be really handy, because this is happening in all villages. And I can quite see, living on Rose End Avenue, which is off the Hawthorne Drive estate in Cromford, I can quite see how it must be very frustrating for residents when they have to park four or five doors down when they've only got, when they've got a young child. But I'm going to give it a few more minutes thought, I think, before I say which way I'm going.
Yeah, John, if you want to bring up a
Just reflecting partly on what's already been said by members, but also on the site visit we carried out today, I accept the view expressed by Councillor Hughes that it's not uniform down there, but it has a quasi-rural character. It's the last bit of housing before you get out into the countryside and off to Kirkhireton in that direction. What you've also got at the moment, which I think is something that you need to take into account, is you've got an embankment down to the road there, which is uniform between the properties. In order to form the parking area here and get an appropriate gradient that the Highway Authority would be happy with to the parking you will have to carry out a significant engineering operation. Now, part of the impact of that is that all of the planting and the structures in the back garden will be set at a lower level than the embankments that surround it, so it will stand out to a certain degree, even when it's planted up, as being an incursion into that relative uniformity. I think also part of the officer concern here is yes about this development, and we always focus on the developments that's proposed, but there's a doubt there that, you know, we will encourage others along this road to seek to do something similar, and I think it's highly unlikely, if those schemes were to come forward in the future, that they would be of a similar nature to this. All residents that want to pursue that in the future would want to do it in their own way, and it would make it more difficult to try and protect that street scene. Precedence is one of those difficult issues in planning. I think it comes partially into play here because it would be the first access formed on this side, and it would set an opportunity for others to follow suit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. Councillor Bull.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was a bit confused because obviously from reading this and then going on the site visit, it was stating about passing traffic and finding it hard for the traffic to be moved, to find out that it's the cul-de-sac as it is. There are lots of estates that are being built at this present moment in time that have the same facilities there. So upon that, I don't feel that the action of having the parking to there is of main need. There is possibly the chance of having something at the front, and I'm in your mind as regards the back, how the fencing would look, because we'd be going along, and although, as everybody's made the point, one's a fence, one's a hedge, one's such, and they have got access by pedestrian access coming out, I'd be a bit concerned about, one, the incline going in, coming out, whether they'd be reversing out into that junction, and the like. So, yeah, I think I'm going to be going with the officer's recommendation on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bull. Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Are we assuming that these vehicles are either reversing in off the road and vice versa, or is the turning area, is it room to turn around inside the area?
The area is roughly 8 by 9 metres, so it's going to be difficult to turn a vehicle round within that space. So I think you're assuming it will either reverse in off the highway or back into the highway.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, members. Any more members wishing to speak now? Looking now to somebody to move a recommendation. Councillor Lees.
Yes, Chair, I'll move the officer's recommendation subject to the information we've been provided. Thank you.
Councillor Donnelly.
I'll second that, Chair. I think that in this occasion, yes, the officers have got it right, and I think it's we need to have, unfortunately, the applicant needs to look at another method of parking probably at the front. Thank you.
Councillor Paul.
Yes, Chair, I was going to offer to second it as well. I do feel that, yeah, it will be setting a precedence, and I am a little wary about, you know, the actual mechanics of actually having to go in to put in the restrictions in on it. So, yeah.
Thank you. I've got nobody else down on my list wishing to. Councillor Slack.
Can I just come back to
Yeah,
you?
of course you can.
Yeah, if the members were mindful to follow our officer's recommendation, I know it's not in this planning application, but would it be possible to talk to Dale's Housing about the grass verge in the centre of the cul-de-sac, where they could put parking bays and probably a planter right down the centre? You know, it's something else completely different, but would that be possible, John, to put that to Dale's Housing? Waterloo rather now.
Well, I think it's difficult for this committee to influence that particular decision. That's not beyond your means as councillors to make representations to Dale's Housing, but I don't think we should tie this committee to make that.
No, it's up to the individual ward members to make that. Yeah. Thank you, John.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I'd worry about that. The space out at the front of the houses looks useful for children to play on, and more space taken up by cars at the front on that space would reduce the availability of space for children. And I think we as an authority should be looking for increasing the amount of outside play areas for children rather than decreasing it. Now, in terms of the moving the cars to the back, their back garden, that reduces the private play space for the children at that house. But paving over the centre, the green area in the centre of this little development would remove the public play area for all the children. And we all know that public play areas are important to children. And I would prefer to see that green area turned into a playground rather than turned into a car park. We have too many...
Councillors, I think we're moving away from what's actually put on the application. I'm afraid
Okay,
what you're talking about is
fair
not a
enough,
material
fair
planning consideration. I'm sorry. Anyway, members, it's been moved and seconded to follow our officer's recommendation for refusal. All those in favour, please show. All those against? Any abstentions? No? In which case that motion's been carried. Thank you very much. Right, the next item we've got is item 4.2. I'd just like to draw yourself to some late representation, so I'll let you read that before we move on with the next item. Right, members, I'll take the late representation as read because it's only a small paragraph. So, as I say, this item 4.2, this is a proposed workshop and crane storage building at Steve Foster Crane, I Unit 1 to 3, Derby Road, Dubridge. Some of us have visited a site across from there, so some of us are actually knowledgeable of that site. So I'll hand over to John if there's any update from John on this subject.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've had a letter come through today from the local flood authority just requesting further information with regards to the drainage. In the officer's report we did refer to the fact that we were waiting further comment. However, we feel that if members were minded to approve this application this evening, that the requirements of the local legal authority could be addressed by an all-encompassing condition requiring that before the development commences in its full construction, that a drainage strategy is submitted which addresses the points that have been raised by the local legal authority. Thank you. I'll take questions.
Questions, members? Councillor Hughes.
Could Gareth just summarise the changes? Because I'm looking at the drawings and I can't see the changes. I'm sorry. Forget that.
Right, I've gone back to the application plan. What you can see is the proposed building is on the top right-hand side. The existing building is centrally set at the top. The nearest dwellings are set sort of centrally to the left of the access road which leads into the site. That explains the relative positions.
Any more questions, members? Councillor Lees.
Yes, Chair, I think this is a very good proposal, and I'm in favour with the officer's recommendation on this one. The site already is quite a large site. it's already got hard standing on it, and I don't think the flood impact will have much cause for concern subject to these conditions that we're talking about. So I'm in favour of the officer's recommendation.
Are you wanting to move that, Councillor?
Yes, if we're at that stage, yeah.
Okay, so that's been moved. Councillor Dunning, second. Yep. Any more questions, members, before we move into debate? No? So we're into debate. Any more members wanted to make any comments on this application? No? In which case it's been moved and seconded for approval. All those please show. That's been passed. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, members, item 4.3, there is some late representation on this, so I'll give you, it's quite a lengthy, so I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes to go through that and then we'll come back. Right, members, I'll take that as read. We have previously visited this application, which is 19/005363, which is a full application of changes to equestrian, erection of stables, block of formation of hard standing. We have 5 speakers on this, so we'll start with the first speaker, Councillor Clevie Newman of Longford Parish Council, to speak against the application. You have 3 minutes and I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left.
Good evening once again. When the committee heard representations from both sides on this issue only 1 month ago, the committee, after some debate and consideration of a number of issues, including the concept of neighbourliness in such a small rural community, made the recommendation that the parties go away and look at a compromised location. Such a location had been mentioned in several of the representations made on the night. As a reminder, the committee's decision on this way forward was a unanimous one. Far from engaging constructively in any compromise discussions, Mr and Mrs Moore appear not to have acted in any way on your recommendation and have returned tonight with substantially the same proposal in substantially the same location. They've submitted a further response covering a number of management arrangements, many of which would be unenforceable after the development was completed, and we would respectfully ask the committee to consider either how they could be policed or disregard them in the deliberations. The new plans also raise further concerns, particularly for the trees on the northern boundary, given the new location of the proposed muck trailer and the access that would be required. There is a high risk that these trees would need removing or reducing in contravention of conservation area restrictions. The Parish Council also would not agree that the compromised location would require a substantially longer driveway or be more noisy. To save time, the majority of the objections made in the Parish Council statement at the last meeting remain and are a matter of public record, so I will not repeat them, other than to remind the committee that they pertain to stipulations within policies PD1 and PD9 of the local plan. As acknowledged by the Planning Committee at the last committee meeting, neighbourliness is very important in a small village such as Longford. Unfortunately, Mr and Mrs Moore appear not to have shown any neighbourliness in their pursuit to get agreement for this planning application in its proposed location, when there is, in the Parish Council's opinion, a nearby and perfectly acceptable alternative location which greatly reduces the impact on their neighbours' ability to be able to enjoy their country homes. This is the first time in the Parish Council's memory that an applicant has remained so intransigent to compromise based on feedback and concerns raised by the local community. The Parish Council believes that the alternative site would not reduce Mr and Mrs Moore's ability to achieve their dream and enjoyment of their horses at their home. In view of the fact that Mr and Mrs Moore appear unwilling to act on the committee's recommendations to enter into discussions on the compromised location, a recommendation reached by an experienced and professional body of councillors after many hours of consideration, site visits and debate, Parish Council would respectfully request that the committee now forces the issue and rejects this application in its current location, stipulating or recommending that any new application must be in the compromised location in the paddock area on the northern boundary. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. The next speaker I have is Simon Lindsay, local resident, to speak against the application. You also have 3 minutes, and I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Members of the committee, thank you for your unanimous vote at the last committee meeting to seek a sensible compromise to this planning application. As you are now well aware, the applicants are not willing to compromise. It is very disappointing that they have decided to take this stance, as basically they show no consideration for us or our neighbours. We are very much concerned about our health and welfare and the loss of our amenity. Members of the committee, you saw at first hand from our back garden the massive impact this enormous stable block would have being so close to our home. In addition, a very large horse lorry parked even closer and a stinking manure trailer on the site would make matters much worse. To site the stable block and horse lorry in the adjacent field, although it would not solve all the problems, it would certainly minimise them and retain some of our amenity which we currently enjoy. This would incur little or no extra cost for the applicants. Mr Bradbury did state at the last committee meeting that he did not see a problem with the stables being sited in the adjacent field from a planning point of view, as other buildings go beyond the building line and the stables are a feature of the countryside. Nothing has really changed from the last committee meeting. In my opinion, this proposal still contravenes many aspects of policies PD1 and almost all of the aspects of PD9. How can moving the stable block back by a few feet change the previous decision to refuse the application, which was based on the proximity to nearby residential properties? In addition, the Trees and Landscape Officer is very concerned about the protected trees in the orchard being lost with the new access and location of the manure trailer. Regardless of the measures the applicants say they will put in place, and please bear in mind they have already acted against current planning and conservation policies, we will still experience noise and odour, flies and vermin, light pollution, etc., etc. Virtually the whole of the orchard will be covered in loose stone and concrete, and this could contribute to contamination on our land via the foul runoff. How on earth will the urine and faeces be removed from the loose gravel, and especially when there is snow or leaves on the ground? A similar stable block a few doors away was approved as that site will be at least 80 metres from residential boundaries in order to protect the residents' amenities. Surely a precedent has been set. This proposed stable block is virtually in our back garden. We have no objections to the horses grazing in the orchard, as this would only be on a very temporary basis. The stables, the huge lorry and stinky manure trailer will be fixed for life. Members of the committee,
30 seconds left.
Thank you. Members of the committee, I appreciate that you have a very difficult decision to make, as it is so finely balanced. I respectfully request that you exercise your right to refuse this application in its current form, as other more suitable locations within the Council's planning policies are clearly available. I thank you all.
Thank you very much. The next speaker I have down on my list is Julie Lindsay, and that's a local resident, also to speak against the application. You also have 3 minutes. I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left.
My understanding of the unanimous deferral by the committee for this stable block
was to come up with a more suitable location in the adjacent field. However, this has been ignored by the applicants, thus causing more stress for ourselves and our neighbours. The new plans submitted state that the stables have been reduced by 25%, when in actual fact, the footprint is still exactly the same size, 60 feet by 43 feet or 18 by 13 metres. If the applicants were to turn the stable block around 180 degrees and put it just over the other side of the fence facing into the adjacent field, it would be less likely to cause runoff, odour, noise, flies, vermin, etc. that could affect us. In addition, the noise and fumes from the horse lorry would be lessened as it wouldn't be parked outside our bedroom window. It would cost no more for the applicants to do this, as it would be virtually in the same place but in the adjacent field. We would much rather see the horses grazing in the orchard, as it is infinitely better than 800 square metre stable block, horse lorry, muck trailer outside our windows and the problems they will bring. In this application, the applicant stated, and I quote, "Horses create a quiet, relaxed environment and it is widely recognised to relieve stress. And just seeing them in a field is relaxing in itself," unquote. I would say that this is a much better prospect looking at than looking at a huge stable block, lorry and muck trailer. This application is not stress relieving, it's stress inducing. We would in fact welcome seeing the horses grazing in the orchard, and as the applicants have already stated, and I quote again, "The paddocks will be regularly cleaned of horse droppings to prevent sour grass, bare patches, the encouragement of unwanted weeds, and to reduce the risk of summer worm larvae spreading into the grass," unquote. So as I see it, having the horses grazing in the orchard next to our home shouldn't be a problem, and the applicants would not be losing any grazing land, which is what they seem to be so concerned about. I would once again ask the committee if the stabling of horses in between residential properties is more important than residents' amenities and their health and well-being, when there is clearly a more suitable option which would better adhere to the council's own planning policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, the next speaker I had down was a Miss Virginia Ledham, but I do believe Mr. or Mrs. Lindsay will be reading a statement out for that person. So you've got 3 minutes. I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Thank you. I live at Millview, which is situated on the north boundary of the proposed stables. I attended a meeting a month ago at which this planning was unanimously deferred by the committee to allow discussion for compromise on the siting of the stables. I feel that no compromise whatsoever has been considered. The size from our aspect has not changed at all, so it is just as imposing and as close to our boundary. The manure trailer is situated even closer now and in a position where a tractor would struggle to access it because of the low branches on the hawthorn tree. My husband takes great care to keep a boundary hedge at a manageable height to protect our view and light. This proposal will ruin that, as would extra planting for screening. The compromise discussed previously, where the stable is situated over the fence with no little or more access drive needed and would be a non-residential boundary, seems a sensible and neighbourly solution which we are willing to accept, but the applicants aren't. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last speaker I've got on this is Mr. Paddy Clark. He's the agent to speak in favour of the application. You have 5 minutes and I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left.
Before I take my seat, Mr. Chairman, may I respectfully request that we be given the same 6 minutes that one household's been given on 2 occasions?
No, I'm afraid they were speaking on they were speaking on behalf of another.
No, they were speaking on behalf of themselves.
No, as far as I'm aware, they were speaking on behalf of Miss Virginia Ledham.
Well, I'm disappointed that you consider that fair, because we asked the planning manager last week to explain whether we could have 2 bites of the cherry. He promised to come back. He failed to do so.
I'm sorry. It's under my discretion. It was under my discretion.
I'll now take my 5 minutes.
Yeah, of course you can, John.
Yeah. So, sorry, just to clarify, I did query the committee procedure with the committee team. They were quite clear that the way the constitution is written, that an applicant or their agent get 5 minutes to make representations. There is no restriction on individual members of a particular household making one or more representations to committee. That may not be viewed by you as fair, but that's the way it's written at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, John. So, Mr. Clark, you have 5 minutes. I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you. The original application was refused because of concerns about the possible noise and odour. These concerns were raised without benefit of a site visit. When the environmental health officer was eventually persuaded to visit, she remarked that the situation was not at all what she was expecting. In consultation with the applicant, some realignment and repositioning was agreed, and those concerns do not now appear in her consultation response for this application. So now every one of your specialist officers state that this development complies with all relevant planning guidance and the adopted plan, and there are no grounds for refusal. Mr. and Mrs. Lindsay don't agree. I quote from their submission dated 4th September, "The latest proposal still contravenes many aspects of the adopted local plan and the policies PD1 and PD9. So the Lindsays imply that your highly qualified officers don't know what they're talking about. The Lindsays claim that horses produce 50 litres of urine daily. That's nonsense. Pool House Equine Hospital tell me that an adult horse weighs around 500 kilos and depending on diet can produce up to 1.20 millilitres of urine per kilo of body weight per hour, or about 5 to 6 litres overnight, which is absorbed by the bedding. The Lindsays claim there will be noise and vehicle movements at all hours of the day and night. That's nonsense. Mr. and Mrs. Moore both have full-time jobs and need to sleep at night, as do their horses. 1 or 2 vehicle movements per week hardly constitutes constant disturbance. Much has been made of the external stable lighting, which is covered in the lighting statement and shown on the plans. They will be bulkhead lights sited under the canopy to the inside of the stable footprint. Any concerns about trees or screening are covered by the conditions of the recommended approval. A soakaway forms part of the groundwork preparations for the foundation slab. This site is not and never has been subject to any flooding. As for siting the stables on the far side of the field, there are hundreds and hundreds of horses with stables in Derbyshire Dales, and during your travels around the district, you rarely see any stables in the middles of the field. Mr. Lindsay says we haven't answered his claim that the horses will contaminate the permeable surface. When horses defecate, they expel their waste matter in nugget form, easily removed with scoop, shovel, or indeed by hand. Horses do not like to urinate on hard surfaces, but if in extremis they do, it would soak away through the permeable chips. This area is purely a way to the stables, and their time on it will in any event be very limited. In your papers, you should have had a plan and photographs of Lady Hull Farm livery at Yeldersley. The barns were converted to 3 dwellings in 2003, and this council gave the original farm building retrospective consent for livery in 2005. The livery barn has an area of 6,000 square feet and contains 14 stables. The south wall of the building is 21 metres from the north wall of the 3 dwellings, which are 15 feet below the level of the livery. My family lived in Unit 3 until January of this year. In all our years there, we never suffered from odour, flies, noise, vermin, runoff, or flooding of any kind. In the middle of Longford Village is the primary school, and right next door is Schoolhouse Farm, a working farm with a number of stables not 10 paces from the farmhouse. There are no records of disturbance or nuisance to the staff or pupils from noise, odour, flies, floods or disease. Very sadly, Mr. and Mrs. Lindsay have decided to become personal and resort to insult, innuendo and conjecture. They question the integrity and good intentions of the applicants by suggesting that they will not use the manure trailer correctly. They question their honesty and character by inferring that they intend to smuggle additional horses into their stables. I do hope that you treat those accusations with the contempt they deserve. Contrary to the Lindsay's assertions of no change, the applicants have gone to extreme lengths to compromise. They have moved the stables a total of 9 metres further west and 8 metres further south. They have reduced the footprint of the permeable surface, reduced the number of stables by 25% and the size of the building by nearly 200 square feet. That is compromise. The position of the manure trailer has not changed from the last meeting, but
Thank
it's
you,
now
Mr.
accessed...
Clark. That is your 5 minutes up.
Thank you, Chairman.
Right, John, Gareth, is there anything you'd like to come back on?
It's me again on this one, Chair. When this item was considered at committee last time, and it was quite a demanding agenda, I seem to recall, and we got the clear message from members on site that they weren't 100% happy and wanted us to have discussions with the applicant, hence the deferral. Now, I engaged in those discussions with the applicant. The applicants have chosen to largely keep the building in the same location. I'll explain some difference to you in a moment. They're quite within their rights to do so, to ask you to determine the application as submitted, and they do so knowing that our environmental health officers haven't raised concerns. The other thing that partly came into play with this was the fact that by moving the stables, they think this is the best location for them, but in moving the stables they would also have to engage in a fresh application as well. So there were a number of complications that fed into their thinking, I think, there. They also felt, and I agreed to a certain degree with them, that there were a number of issues that were discussed on site and in the committee where perhaps the management of the stables and how they were going to impact on the neighbours, those impacts hadn't come across clearly. So that's why within the report that you've got, there's a series of bullet points that explain precisely how the stables are going to be managed to try and address some of those concerns raised by the neighbours. In terms of the actual amendment to the stable scheme, if you look on the right-hand side of that image, you'll notice, if you were one of the people that visited the site last time, that the area of grassland between the neighbours and the stable block has increased by something over 6 metres. Now, the benefit of that is one, that's a softer boundary with the neighbour, but also it means that the horse box will have to be parked a considerable distance from the common boundary. That was one of the concerns. You'll also see that the area of hard standing to the north of the building has been reduced. That's been softened to try and improve the outlook to some degree for the neighbours, and there's more greening to the south of the building as well. But also the stable block itself, in that top right-hand corner of the shape of the stables there, there's now an area of grass where previously there was the building in that top right-hand corner. So there have been changes. They are changes that, in my view, are beneficial in terms of providing some safeguards to the neighbours. I'd also point out, there are some corrections that need to be made in terms of the late representations that have been put forward by the neighbours. By my measurements, the nearest point of these stables to their boundary is 20 metres and not 14 metres. Members that went on site last time actually physically looked at the location of the stables. We've had an answer in terms of the lighting from the applicants in terms of how that will be concealed under the bulkhead. I think we've had a perfectly plausible explanation as to how waste is going to be managed from this site. All things being equal, Chair, I think there are improvements as a result of the deferral, but the recommendation is the same from officers, that this is a scheme that we should be approved. Happy to take questions.
Right, members, over to you. Questions. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Just as someone relatively new to this committee who hasn't been on a site visit, just want 2 or 3 questions about things that that should be taken into consideration in terms of what is relevant when making a decision on planning. So there's a lot of reference to a potentially better alternative site. Does the fact that there is potentially a better alternative site, is that something we should consider, or should we purely base a decision based on the merits of this site? Secondly, there's reference in here, more than one reference to flaunting of current planning policies that have already taken place by the applicants. Again, is that just purely conjecture? Is there any evidence that has happened? Because that perhaps gives us an indication as to whether or not any other sorts of regulations that are enforced on the applicants are going to be met. And finally, neighbourliness has also been referred to. Is neighbourliness also something that should be considered as a relevant factor when considering a planning application such as this?
Thank you, Chair. Some good questions there in terms of helping members to make a decision. I don't think you have to have much regard to the fact that the neighbours think that an alternative site is better. What you have to do is assess the merits of this particular application and decide whether it's acceptable or not. You know, if you were minded to turn the application down and an appeal failed here, then alternatives could be explored, but you're being asked to determine the merits of this particular application. So I think you shouldn't get too exercised by that. In terms of flouting planning policies, I believe that there's some vegetation being taken down on site. I think that was an error on the part of the applicants. I don't think it was done with particular malice. I don't think there's any reason to suggest that they wouldn't comply with conditions as part of this. And as you know, planning is all about land use and not people's character or reputation. So I think you should largely set that aside. In terms of neighbourliness, yes, it's a consideration in terms of where you can actually pin down what those adverse impacts are. So if you've got a very tall building right up against somebody's back windows, then clearly that's both unneighbourly and it's an unneighbourly impact where there's a planning basis to reject a scheme. But we can't protect things like views. I don't doubt that the neighbours in relation to this property, because we've been in their back garden, enjoy the view and outlook they've got over open countryside, but we cannot protect that view through the planning system unless the impact of these buildings are so large and so onerous on their amenity that it would warrant a reason for refusal. So yes, it's a consideration, but we don't think it's an overriding reason to reject this scheme.
Councillor Bull.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Can you confirm that about the issues with the PD1 as regards the distance from surrounding properties is within our remit in our plan? And considering it is supposed to be an orchard, how many trees are being felled to build this actual stable block, if any? And the other issue about initially when the officers went to see, looking at noise and odour and the relining of it, has this actually been done and considered? Obviously I didn't go to the planning and I didn't go to the site, but looking at the plans that you showed me earlier of the before and now the amended, it looks to me as though things have moved and are smaller. So can you just confirm that, please?
Yes, I think the applicants have amended the scheme and they have provided clarifications to try and provide some reassurance to members that this stable block can coexist with nearby residents in a satisfactory manner. In terms of the amount of trees that have been removed from the site, I couldn't confirm other than that I actually saw one tree stump when I was out on site. I was advised, as I've explained earlier, that was an error on the part of the applicants. They didn't realise that that particular tree was covered by conservation area consent protection. So I think we have to take that on face value.
Councillor Wakeman.
Yes, I'd like to propose this for approval with officers' conditions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bright.
Could you just, John, could you please just confirm that there is adequate protection for the trees that have been referred to that could be damaged by this application, please?
Again, if you look at the image on the screen, members, there are 2 trees on the northern boundary there. Now, I explained to you at the start of this presentation that the original plan showed hard standing immediately to the south of those trees and would certainly have jeopardised them. We have a substantially greater area of retained grassland around those trees, so there's no reason why those shouldn't be retained. Any removal of trees within a conservation area does require our consent in any event, so we would exercise control over this, but the planning drawings should allow for their retention.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you. Just enlarging on what Councillor Bright's just been speaking about. If there's any trees obviously taken away, they should be replaced by more planting, and planting is a necessity now. We need to plant more and more trees with a carbon extraction, and also not just for carbon extraction, also for animals when it's very hot in summer days, love to lie in the trees for shade. So could we encourage more tree planting on this application, John, in various areas?
I'm not going to suggest we include it as a specific requirement, but I mean the applicants are present, they control quite a substantial area of land, and I'm sure they're listening to you in terms of trying to create the right environment for the horses.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I just a couple of issues on the amendments? Can I just clarify whether or not the manure trailer is now located closer to the neighbouring property, because that to me wouldn't be conducive to neighbourliness. Secondly, there's questions about the 4th horse. I noticed that one of the stables in the corner is twice as big. Is that where that's going to be stabled? That's a question I'd like to just clarify. And Mr Bradbury, can you confirm that the gentleman, the agent, was alluding to the fact that there's been a 25% reduction. Can you confirm that there has been a 25% reduction in the size, please? Thank you.
Well, taking the last point first, I can't really do that calculation on the hoof, as it were. Excuse the pun. But I've explained to you how the scale was reduced slightly. I don't know why, Gareth, you've gone on to a different image there. Go back to the original one. Yeah, the amendment was in the top right-hand corner there, where an area which equates to what is hatched as grassland now has been removed from the building. I couldn't confirm whether that's 15, 20 or 25% without going away and measuring it. That area was, within the original building design, was down as a grooming area. The amount of loose boxes, loose box floor area, remains the same in the amended scheme. The muck trailer, in terms of the muck trailer, you can see it there in the top left-hand corner. The position of the muck trailer is essentially the same. On the revised drawing, it's been rotated through 90 degrees, but its impact on the neighbours is exactly the same.
Councillor Pauling.
Yes, I just want to come back to the permeable stone issue. Can you tell me, are the horses, looking at the plan, are the horses going to be led out through a gate? I can't remember from the site visit whether there was a gate there or not, opposite where those 2 cars are shown. Or are they going all the way around past the horse box and then out where the trailer is shown? Because if they are, I'm a bit concerned that we've heard about ducting coming in the stables to take away waste from the stables. But if they are, and even if it is a smaller amount than the objector said, going to pass any urine on those stones, and that can't be cleared away. If it rains, where's that going to go? That's, I just wondered if, those 2 questions really.
Yes. In terms of the access to the field, my understanding is, when we've previously been to the site, there's a gate in the bottom left-hand corner there, which would be used as an access to get out into the field for the horses. In terms of the amount of urine that horses create, I think you've received a fairly detailed explanation, far greater than my understanding of the habits of horses. They would appear to be relatively unlikely to want to urinate on the permeable surface, and they're only going to be there for a very short period of time whilst they're being tethered and then taken out into the field. So I think any concern about how that might create adverse runoff, I think is overstated in my view. I think it's unlikely to have any environmental impact on the neighbours. The manure side of things, I think, fairly standard management around stables of somebody going around with a shovel and shoveling that manure into a barrow and then barrowing it into the muck trailer. That's how it's dealt with. They've got no interest in retaining muck on the yard. They want to keep a clean and tidy stable environment.
Right, thank you for that.
Councillor Buckley.
Do we know where the horses are at present? Is this something which could be happening right the way through the village? Is talking about precedent from on the last on the last application? How much loss of field habitat is there? Could this cause in future, and can we consider that?
Well, I mean, if you were to go around our district, and particularly the south of our district, stables and the keeping of horses is very commonplace, and generally speaking, it seems to coexist with properties fairly comfortably. You make a compromise when you live in the countryside that there are smells that you might not get in another environment. In terms of, is it a big land take overall? No, generally speaking, not, and I think the management of most of these operations is reasonably environmentally sustainable in my opinion.
Right, nobody else down for questions, so I'll move into debate. Councillor Bright.
Thanks, Chair. I believe if we had somebody...
It's been moved.
It's been moved. I will second this. It does seem, from what's been said by both parties, that there has been a bit of a give and take here. Maybe not as much as the neighbours would like, but it does, from my point of view, seem that the applicants have tried. Maybe not as much as everyone would have liked, but they have tried. So I feel they've made some changes which have made it a better application. All I would say is, I personally lived on a farm with big stables for years, and horses tend to be very clean and tidy animals, and they don't tend to smell that much. So I personally wouldn't have an issue with that, but I know that's not a planning issue. But yeah, as I say, the applicants do, in my opinion, seem to have made some changes, so I'll be supporting this and seconding it.
Right, I've got anybody else for debate? Councillor Slapp.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Bright, really. They've made changes and it's been improved from previously. And horses are a clean animal, reasonably clean animal, so I can't see a big problem here at all now. So I will be supporting this, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slapp. Right, I've got nobody else down on my list, so it's been moved and seconded for approval. All those in favour, please show. Right, it's been passed. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. So, right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll just move on to a little bit of housekeeping now. The last few bits of the agenda, so we can all go home. So we'll now move to item 5, information on active and closed enforcement. John, is there any comments you want to on that?
Nothing to add, Chair. I'll move that, Chair.
Move second. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And appeals, John.
Nothing to add, Chair.
Right, in which case then I'll move to be noted. Second. All those in favour? Thank you very, very much, members.